In the endless dark of space, where stars flickered like distant lanterns, the Zixari were no strangers to mystery. For centuries, their species had roamed the galaxy in search of knowledge. Driven by an insatiable curiosity about the universe and its secrets, their sleek research vessel, Luminara, glided silently through the void, scanning for anything unusual. It wasn't uncommon for them to pick up faint signals, echoes of dying stars or stray broadcasts from other civilizations. But this time was different. It started as a whisper, almost too faint to notice. A series of pulses, rhythmic yet irregular, drifted into the ship's sensors. At first, the crew dismissed it as cosmic noise, but then something caught their attention. Hidden within the signal were patterns, complex mathematical sequences that repeated themselves over and over. "This isn't random," said Talon, the ship's lead scientist, her voice tinged with excitement. "Someone, or something, is trying to communicate." The signal came from a remote star system on the edge of explored space. Its sun was old and dim, clinging to life as it burned its last reserves of fuel. Orbiting it was a single planet, shrouded in thick clouds and lush greenery. To the Zixari, it looked both beautiful and eerie, like a jewel wrapped in shadows. They named it Velora after one of their ancient words for hidden. As they approached, the signal grew stronger, confirming its origin. But there was something unsettling about it. The patterns weren't just complex. They felt deliberate, almost urgent. Commander Rinus, a seasoned explorer with years of experience, called a meeting in the ship's observation deck. Through the large viewport, Velora loomed before them, its surface obscured by swirling mists. "We need to investigate," Talon urged, her eyes gleaming with determination. "Whatever sent this signal is intelligent. This could be our most important discovery yet." Rinus hesitated. There was always risk in venturing into the unknown, especially when dealing with potential alien life. Still, he couldn't ignore the possibility of uncovering something extraordinary. "Prepare the landing party," he ordered, "but proceed with caution. We don't know what we're walking into." As the Luminara descended through Velora's atmosphere, the crew marveled at the planet's beauty. Towering trees stretched toward the sky, their leaves glowing softly under the weak sunlight. Rivers wound through valleys like silver threads, reflecting the pale light. But despite its vibrant appearance, the world felt strangely quiet. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. It was as if nature itself held its breath. When the ship touched down near the source of the signal, the landing party stepped out cautiously. The air was breathable, though tinged with an unfamiliar sweetness. Around them, the landscape seemed frozen in time. Buildings rose from the ground, half buried beneath layers of moss and vines. Some structures still stood tall, their shapes eerily familiar. Rectangular towers, wide roads, and rusted machines scattered among the ruins. "This looks human," whispered Jarl, one of the engineers, his voice trembling with disbelief. He pointed to a crumbling sign covered in faded letters. Though worn by time, the symbols resembled those used by humans, a species long thought confined to Earth and its immediate colonies. But if these ruins belonged to humans, how did they end up here? And why had they been abandoned? As the team ventured deeper, they found strange devices embedded in the walls, pulsating faintly with a soft blue light. One of them reacted when Talon touched it, projecting a hologram of people in lab coats working together. The image flickered and dissolved, leaving more questions than answers. Whatever happened here, it was clear that Velora held secrets far greater than anyone anticipated. The Zixari couldn't have known then just how deeply those secrets would challenge everything they believed about life, intelligence, and survival. The Zixari stood in silence, their wide, luminous eyes scanning the ruins around them. The holographic image had vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving behind only questions. Talon knelt beside the crystalline device that had projected it, her slender fingers tracing its smooth surface. It pulsed faintly under her touch, almost like a heartbeat. "This technology, it's unlike anything we've encountered before," she murmured, her voice filled with awe and unease. Gerald adjusted his scanner, analyzing the structure of the ruins. These buildings, they're not native to this planet. Look at the materials. They match Earth-based construction techniques. He paused, turning to face the others. If these are human artifacts, then how did humans get here? And why did they leave? Commander Rennis frowned, his antennae twitching slightly, a sign of deep thought among the Zixari. We need to keep exploring. There might be more clues deeper inside. With a nod, the team moved forward, stepping carefully over fallen debris and tangled roots. The air grew heavier as they ventured farther into the ruins, the sweet scent giving way to something metallic and sharp. They reached what appeared to be the heart of the settlement, a large central plaza surrounded by towering structures. At its center stood a massive monument, partially overtaken by vines. Carved into its base were symbols and images that told a story. Humans working together, building cities, planting crops, raising families. But toward the top, the carvings changed. Figures lay motionless on the ground while others looked skyward, with despair etched onto their faces. The final panel showed shadowy shapes emerging from darkness, indistinct but menacing. "This doesn't look good," said Gerald, pointing to the ominous figures. "Something went wrong here. Something big." As they examined the monument, one of the crystalline devices nearby lit up suddenly, startling the group. A new hologram sprang to life, showing scenes of chaos. Fires raging, people fleeing, machines malfunctioning. In the background, strange humanoid forms moved awkwardly, their bodies shimmering with unnatural energy. Then, abruptly, the projection ended, plunging the plaza back into eerie quiet. "What are those things?" asked Lyra, the youngest member of the team, her voice trembling. She clutched her data pad tightly, recording everything despite her fear. Before anyone could answer, a rustling sound came from the edge of the plaza. Everyone froze, their sensitive hearing picking up every detail. Leaves crunched softly, followed by the faint scrape of metal against stone. Slowly, shadows began to emerge from the dense forest surrounding the ruins. Humanoid shapes stepped cautiously into view, their features obscured by the dim light filtering through the canopy. The creatures, if they could even be called that, were unlike anything the Zixari had ever seen. Their skin seemed translucent, glowing faintly with an inner light. Beneath it, intricate circuitry pulsed rhythmically, blending organic tissue with synthetic components. Some had limbs elongated unnaturally. Others had eyes that glowed like tiny stars. They moved silently, watching the intruders with unreadable expressions. "Stay calm," Rhaenys whispered, raising a hand to signal caution. "We don't know if they're hostile." For several tense moments, neither side moved. Then, without warning, one of the beings raised an arm, pointing directly at the crystalline device in Talon's hands. Its posture wasn't aggressive, but there was something commanding about the gesture. Before anyone could react, the entire group of shadowy figures turned and melted back into the forest, disappearing as swiftly as they had come. "They want us to follow them," Talon said quietly, staring at the direction where the beings had vanished. Her tone was steady, but her pulse raced. Whatever those entities were, they clearly knew something about the ruins, and perhaps the fate of the humans who once called this place home. Rhaenys glanced at his team, weighing the risks. Following unknown beings into unfamiliar territory was dangerous, but staying put wouldn't answer their burning questions. "We'll go," he decided finally, "but stay alert. We're walking blind, and we can't afford mistakes." With that, the Zixari gathered their equipment and set off after the mysterious figures, their hearts pounding with equal parts fear and curiosity. What awaited them in the depths of the forest? Only time would tell. The forest was alive with an eerie stillness, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. The Zixari followed the shadowy figures cautiously, their glowing eyes scanning the dense undergrowth for any signs of danger. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighed down by the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Yet they pressed on, driven by a mix of curiosity and duty. The crystalline device in Talon's hands pulsed faintly, almost as if guiding them forward. After what felt like hours, the group emerged into a clearing dominated by a massive structure half buried in the earth. Its walls shimmered faintly, covered in moss and lichen, but unmistakably artificial. Strange symbols etched into its surface glowed softly, responding to the presence of the Zixari. The shadowy figures stopped at the entrance, gesturing silently for the aliens to proceed. Then, without another movement, they vanished back into the shadows, leaving the team alone. "This place, it feels important," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. She hugged her datapad close, recording every detail with trembling hands. Talon stepped forward, her focus entirely on the structure. "Let's see what secrets it holds," she said, determination masking her unease. As the team entered, they found themselves in a vast chamber illuminated by the soft glow of more crystalline devices embedded in the walls. These devices weren't just decorative. They were active, humming with energy and projecting holograms that flickered to life as the Zixari approached. One hologram showed humans working in laboratories, their faces tense with urgency. Another depicted scientists poring over complex diagrams, discussing something in hushed tones. A third revealed rows of pods containing humanoid forms suspended in liquid, their bodies connected to machines via glowing wires. The images painted a picture of desperation, a colony fighting against some unseen threat. These recordings must be logs, Talon realized, her fingers flying over her scanner as she accessed the data stored within the crystals. They're documenting their history. As the fragments came together, the story began to unfold. Centuries ago, this human colony had thrived, a beacon of hope for humanity's expansion into the stars. But then disaster struck. A deadly plague swept through the population, killing thousands within months. Desperate to survive, the colonists turned to radical solutions. They experimented with merging organic matter with synthetic materials, creating hybrid beings designed to resist disease and adapt to harsh conditions. At first, the experiments seemed successful. The hybrids were stronger, smarter, and immune to illness. But something went horribly wrong. The hybrids began developing sentience, questioning their purpose and rejecting their creator's control. Fearing rebellion, the human leaders grew paranoid. They tried to shut down the project, destroying the hybrids' neural networks to prevent further evolution. The hybrids fought back, igniting a brutal conflict that left both sides decimated. "They turned on each other," Gerald murmured, his voice heavy with disbelief. "It's like they destroyed themselves out of fear." But not all the logs pointed to mutual destruction. Some entries hinted at survivors, hybrids who escaped into the wilderness, adapting to their new environment while retaining fragments of their human memories. Could these shadowy figures be their descendants? If so, how much of their humanity remained? Commander Rennis watched the holograms with growing concern. "If these hybrids are still here, we need to tread carefully. We don't know what they've become, or what they want from us." As the team continued exploring the chamber, they discovered a final log buried deep within the crystal archives. It showed a group of hybrids standing together, their translucent forms glowing with resolve. One of them spoke directly into the recording device, their voice distorted but clear enough to understand. "You will come," the hybrid said, addressing whoever might find the message. "When you do, remember this: we are not your enemy, but neither are we your friends. We are what remains." The screen went dark, plunging the chamber back into silence. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of the discovery hung heavily in the air. Whatever awaited them outside these ruins, one thing was certain: the Zixari were no longer alone on Velora, and their next move could determine whether they lived to tell the tale. The Zixari exited the ruins, their minds racing with the implications of what they had just uncovered. The hybrids, descendants of humanity's desperate experiments, were real, and they were still here. But where? And why had they chosen to reveal themselves only briefly before disappearing again? The forest loomed ahead, dense and impenetrable, its shadows stretching long as the dim sunlight began to fade. Commander Rennis glanced at his team, his antennae twitching slightly. "We need to find them," he said firmly. "If they're watching us, we can't afford to wait." Talon nodded, clutching the crystalline device tightly. It pulsed faintly in her hands, almost like a beacon calling out to whoever, or whatever, was hiding among the trees. "They left us clues for a reason," she said. "Maybe they want us to follow." Her voice was calm, but there was an edge of nervousness beneath it. None of them knew what awaited them deeper in the forest. As they ventured further, the air grew colder, carrying an unsettling stillness. The usual sounds of wildlife were absent, replaced by an oppressive silence that made every step feel heavier. Jarrell adjusted his scanner, trying to detect any signs of movement. "Something's out there," he muttered under his breath. "I can't pinpoint it, but it's close." Suddenly, Lyra gasped, pointing toward a cluster of trees. A pair of glowing eyes stared back at them from the darkness. Then another pair appeared, and another, until the entire group was surrounded by shadowy figures. They moved silently, their translucent forms blending seamlessly with the dim light. Some had elongated limbs, others had jagged edges where skin met metal. Their glowing circuits pulsed rhythmically, creating an eerie symphony of light. "Stay calm," Renus ordered, raising a hand to signal caution. His voice was steady, but his antennae twitched rapidly, a sign of tension. "They're not attacking yet." One of the figures stepped forward, taller than the rest. Its body shimmered faintly, revealing glimpses of circuitry beneath its translucent skin. It tilted its head, studying the Zixari with an unreadable expression. Then, without warning, it raised an arm and pointed toward the deeper parts of the forest. The gesture was clear. They wanted the Zixari to follow. "They're leading us somewhere," Talon whispered, her eyes fixed on the figure. "But where?" Rennis hesitated, weighing the risks. Following these beings into unknown territory was dangerous, but staying put wouldn't answer their questions. "We'll go," he decided finally, "but stay alert. We don't know if this is a trap." The shadowy figures turned and began moving through the forest, their movements fluid and silent. The Zixari followed cautiously, their senses on high alert. As they walked, the environment around them changed subtly. The trees grew taller, their twisted roots forming intricate patterns on the ground. Strange plants glowed faintly, casting an ethereal light over the path. It felt otherworldly, as though they were stepping into a realm untouched by time. After what seemed like hours, the group arrived at a clearing dominated by a massive tree unlike anything they'd ever seen. Its trunk shimmered with veins of crystal, pulsating softly with the same blue light emitted by the devices in the ruins. Around it stood more hybrids, their forms even stranger than those they'd encountered earlier. Some had wings made of translucent material. Others had multiple arms or additional eyes. All of them watched the Zixari with an intensity that sent chills down their spines. The leader, the one who had guided them, stepped closer to the crystalline tree and placed a hand on its surface. Instantly, the tree lit up, projecting holographic images into the air. Scenes of human scientists working alongside early versions of the hybrids flickered before fading into images of chaos and destruction. Finally, the projection showed the hybrids retreating into the wilderness, leaving behind the ruins the Zixari had discovered. "They're showing us their history," Talon realized, her voice filled with awe. "This tree, it's like a memory bank." But as the final image faded, the hybrids turned their attention back to the Zixari. One of them stepped forward, its glowing eyes locking onto Commander Rennis. Then, in a distorted voice that echoed strangely, it spoke a single word: "Why?" The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Why had the Zixari come? Why now, after centuries of isolation? And most importantly, what did they want from the hybrids? No one answered immediately. The silence stretched, broken only by the soft hum of the crystalline tree. Whatever trust might have existed between the two groups hung precariously in the balance, waiting to tip either way. The single word, "Why?" echoed in the clearing, reverberating through the stillness like a challenge. The hybrid's glowing eyes fixed on Commander Rinus, demanding an answer. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of the question pressed down on the Zixari, forcing them to confront not just their presence here, but also the implications of their discovery. Talon stepped forward cautiously, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "We came because we detected your signal," she explained gently, holding up the crystalline device that had guided them this far. "We didn't know it would lead us to you, but now that we're here, we want to understand." The hybrid tilted its head slightly, as if processing her words. Then, with another flicker of light from its translucent body, it gestured toward the crystalline tree. Images began to project once more, this time showing scenes of violence and destruction. Humans attacking hybrids, tearing apart their mechanical components, burning entire settlements. It was brutal, visceral, and unmistakably a warning. "They don't trust us," Jarrell murmured under his breath, his scanner trembling slightly in his hands. "They think we're like the humans who betrayed them." Commander Rinus clenched his fists tightly, his antennae twitching rapidly. He knew the situation was delicate. One wrong move could escalate into conflict, or worse. "We are not those humans," he said firmly, addressing the hybrids directly. "We are explorers, seekers of knowledge. We mean no harm." The leader of the hybrids regarded him silently for a long moment before stepping closer. Its movements were deliberate, almost ceremonial. When it spoke again, its distorted voice carried a tone of finality. "You will leave. This is our home." Lyra flinched at the command, clutching her data pad tightly. "What happens if we don't?" she whispered nervously, though quietly enough that only Jarrell heard her. Before anyone could respond, the hybrid turned back to the crystalline tree and activated one last projection. This time, the image showed something unexpected: the ruins where the Zixari had first landed, surrounded by strange symbols that pulsed with ominous energy. Then the scene shifted, revealing the same location engulfed in flames. The message was clear: if the Zixari stayed, disaster would follow. "They're giving us a choice," Talon realized aloud, her voice tinged with both fear and determination. "Leave now, or face consequences." Rinus hesitated, torn between caution and curiosity. The hybrid's warning was impossible to ignore, but he couldn't shake the feeling that leaving would mean abandoning something vital, a chance to learn about humanity's lost legacy and perhaps even bridge the gap between species. "If we go now, we may never understand what truly happened here," he said quietly to his team. "And we owe it to ourselves, and to them, to find out." Jarrell frowned, shaking his head. "Commander, they've made their stance clear, pushing further risks, provoking them. You saw what they're capable of." But Talon interjected, her eyes shining with resolve. "Maybe they're afraid because they don't know us yet. If we leave without trying to communicate properly, won't that make things worse? They might see it as rejection." The debate raged silently among the group, each member weighing the pros and cons. Meanwhile, the hybrids watched patiently, their glowing forms casting shifting patterns of light across the clearing. Though they remained silent, their presence was overwhelming, a constant reminder of the power they held over this world. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Rinus made his decision. "We'll stay, for now," he said firmly, meeting the gaze of the hybrid leader. "But we'll respect your boundaries. We're here to learn, not to take or destroy." The hybrid studied him intently, its expression unreadable. Then, without another word, it turned and gestured for the other hybrids to retreat into the forest. As quickly as they had appeared, they vanished, leaving the Zixari alone in the clearing. For a moment, relief washed over the team, but it was short-lived. The hybrid's warning lingered heavily in the air, a stark reminder that their patience had limits. Whatever secrets Valora held, uncovering them would require more than just courage. It would demand trust. And trust, especially between two such different beings, was fragile at best. The hybrid's departure left the Zixari standing in uneasy silence. The crystalline tree still pulsed faintly, its light casting long shadows across the clearing. Each member of the team wrestled with their own thoughts, fear, curiosity, and determination mingling uneasily within them. Talon broke the quiet first, her voice soft but resolute. "We can't just stand here," she said, glancing toward the retreating forms of the hybrids fading into the forest. "If we want to understand them, and ourselves, we need to try harder." Commander Rennis nodded slowly, his antennae twitching as he processed her words. "Agreed. But how do we communicate without provoking them further?" It was then that Lara, the youngest of the group, stepped forward hesitantly. What if we use the crystals?" she suggested, pointing to the crystalline device in Talon's hands. "They seem to respond to touch, and the hybrids clearly value them. Maybe they're a way to bridge our languages." Talon considered this, her glowing eyes narrowing thoughtfully. She turned back to the crystalline tree and placed her hand on its surface. Instantly, it lit up, projecting images once again. But this time, they were fragmented, chaotic flashes of both human and hybrid memories. Scenes of cooperation, betrayal, survival, and loss flickered before dissolving into static. It was overwhelming, yet somehow familiar, as though the tree itself held pieces of consciousness from both species. Kellis, the linguist who had been quietly observing until now, moved closer. Her slender fingers traced the pulsating veins of the crystal, her movements deliberate. "These devices aren't just tools. They're alive," she murmured, almost to herself. "They store emotions, not just data. If we can tap into that." Her voice trailed off as she focused intently on the patterns of light emanating from the tree. Slowly, she began mimicking the rhythm of the pulses with small gestures of her own, a series of rhythmic taps against the crystal surface. At first, nothing happened. Then, faintly, the tree responded. Its glow intensified, and a new hologram appeared, a swirling mass of colors and shapes that shifted and danced in response to Kellis's movements. One of the hybrids re-emerged silently from the edge of the clearing, watching Kellis with an intensity that made the others nervous. But instead of hostility, there was something else in its gaze: curiosity. It approached cautiously, its translucent form shimmering as it extended a hand toward the tree. Together, Kellis and the hybrid touched the crystal simultaneously. For a moment, everything froze. Then, like a dam breaking, a flood of sensations surged through the connection. Images, sounds, emotions, all jumbled together but somehow coherent. Kellis gasped, staggering back slightly as the hybrid withdrew its hand. She blinked rapidly, trying to process what she'd experienced. "They're not entirely hostile," she said breathlessly, turning to the others. "They're confused. Angry, yes, but also grieving. They remember being human, or at least they carry fragments of humanity within them. And they feel abandoned." The revelation stunned the group. Commander Rennis exchanged a glance with Talon, who looked equally shaken. "So they're not just machines or experiments gone wrong," he said slowly. "They're survivors, fragments of a broken past." Encouraged by the breakthrough, Kellis continued experimenting with the crystals, using light pulses and rhythmic patterns to establish rudimentary communication. Over hours, she managed to convey simple concepts: peace, understanding, curiosity, and receive responses in kind. The hybrids remained wary but less aggressive, occasionally gesturing toward the ruins or emitting pulses of light that seemed to indicate agreement or acknowledgement. By the time night fell, the team had established a fragile line of communication. Though progress was slow and fraught with misunderstandings, the tension between the two groups eased slightly. For the first time since arriving on Valora, the Zixari felt a glimmer of hope. But even as they celebrated the breakthrough, Kalis couldn't shake a lingering sense of unease. The hybrids' emotions ran deep, too deep for comfort. Beneath their grief and confusion lay something darker, something unresolved. As she stared into the pulsating glow of the crystalline tree, she wondered, had they truly bridged the gap between species, or merely scratched the surface of a much larger conflict? The fragile bond between the Zixari and the hybrids grew stronger with each passing day, but it was far from stable. Kalis spent hours at the crystalline tree, refining her communication methods and piecing together fragments of the hybrids' history. The images they shared were vivid yet disjointed, flashes of human faces, burning cities, and mechanical limbs being torn apart. Each revelation painted a clearer picture of betrayal and suffering, but also raised more questions. One evening, as twilight bathed the clearing in soft hues, Kalis noticed something unusual about the crystalline tree. Beneath its glowing surface, faint symbols pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. She traced them carefully, her fingers brushing against the cool, smooth material. To her surprise, the symbols shifted under her touch, rearranging themselves into patterns that resembled coordinates. "Commander," she called out, her voice tinged with excitement. "I think these symbols are pointing to another location, somewhere underground." Rennis approached cautiously, his antennae twitching slightly. "Underground? You mean there's more to this place than we've seen so far?" "It's possible," Talon interjected, examining the patterns closely. "If these hybrids were created here, there must be facilities where the experiments took place. Labs, storage chambers, maybe even records we haven't uncovered yet." The idea electrified the team. If they could find additional archives, they might finally piece together the full story of what happened to the colony, and why the hybrids still harbored such deep resentment. But venturing deeper into unknown territory carried risks, especially given the hybrids' cautious demeanor. Kalis turned to one of the hybrids standing nearby, gesturing toward the symbols and mimicking a downward motion with her hands. After a moment of hesitation, the hybrid nodded slowly and pointed toward a dense thicket at the edge of the forest. It wasn't an invitation, but it was permission, or at least acknowledgement. Guided by the coordinates and the hybrid's vague directions, the team set off into the wilderness. The journey was treacherous. Roots tangled their feet, and low-hanging branches scraped against their sensitive skin. Yet the promise of answers kept them moving forward. Hours later, they arrived at a concealed entrance hidden beneath thick vines and moss. A rusted metal door stood partially ajar, revealing a dark staircase leading downward. "This is it," Jarl whispered, his scanner buzzing softly as it detected traces of energy emanating from below. "Whatever's down there, it's active." Descending cautiously, the group entered a labyrinth of tunnels lit by dim emergency lights. The air was cold and stale, carrying the faint metallic tang of ancient machinery. Along the walls, they found remnants of human technology, control panels, monitors, and storage pods eerily similar to those depicted in the holograms. But it was the final chamber that left them speechless. Inside, rows upon rows of preserved logs lined the walls, protected by glass cases. In the center of the room stood a massive terminal, its screen flickering to life as Talon activated it. The recordings revealed the truth behind the hybrid's creation, not just as tools for survival, but as scapegoats for humanity's failures. The human leaders had intentionally sabotaged the hybrids' neural networks, fearing their growing independence. When the hybrids resisted, the humans labeled them monsters and sought to exterminate them. They didn't just betray them, Lyra murmured, tears welling up in her wide eyes. They tried to erase them completely. As the team absorbed the devastating revelations, the ground trembled faintly. From the shadows emerged several hybrids, their glowing forms radiating anger. One of them stepped forward, its voice distorted but clear. "You know now," it said. "What will you do?" The question hung heavily in the air. The hybrids weren't asking for sympathy. They wanted justice. and the Zixari realized they were caught in the middle of a centuries-old conflict that showed no signs of resolution. The chamber fell silent, the weight of the hybrid's question pressing down on the Zixari. "What will you do?" Their words echoed not just in the room, but in the minds of everyone present. Commander Rennis clenched his fists tightly, his antennae twitching as he processed the gravity of the situation. The hybrids weren't merely seeking acknowledgement of their suffering. They were demanding action. But what could the Zixari offer? Justice, retribution, forgiveness. Talon stepped forward cautiously, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "We came here to understand," she began, addressing the hybrids directly. "And now that we know the truth, we can help ensure this never happens again, to anyone." The lead hybrid tilted its head slightly, its glowing eyes narrowing, as if trying to decipher her sincerity. Then, without warning, it extended a hand toward the terminal, activating another holographic projection. This one showed images of stars, galaxies, and other alien civilizations scattered across the cosmos. The message was clear. The hybrids, now calling themselves the Ascendants, had been watching, waiting for intelligent life to return to Velora. "They've been planning something," Gerald whispered nervously, glancing at the others. "Something bigger than just revenge." Kalis nodded, her focus fixed on the shifting holograms. "They want more than justice. They see themselves as evolved, superior. They believe they're destined to guide or replace other species." As if confirming her theory, the lead Ascendant turned to face the Zixari fully. Its voice resonated through the chamber, distorted yet commanding. "You are explorers, seekers of knowledge, like us." It paused, then added, "Join us." The team exchanged uneasy glances. Join them. What did that even mean? "They're offering integration," Talon realized aloud, her voice tinged with both awe and dread. "They want to merge their consciousness with ours." Commander Rennis frowned deeply, his instincts screaming caution. "Merge how? Explain yourself." The Ascendant gestured toward the crystalline devices embedded in the walls, and then toward the Zixari themselves. "Your bodies limit you. Your minds decay. With us, you transcend. You become eternal." Lyra gasped softly, clutching her datapad tightly. "They're offering immortality, but at what cost?" Gerald shook his head vehemently. "This isn't evolution, it's assimilation. They don't want allies, they want converts." But Kalis hesitated, her expression thoughtful. "Think about it," she said quietly. "They've already surpassed organic limitations. If we merged with them, we'd gain their knowledge, their resilience, everything they've learned over centuries, and lose ourselves in the process." Rhaenys countered sharply. "Is that truly worth it?" The debate raged silently among the group, each member wrestling with the implications. Meanwhile, the Ascendants watched patiently, their glowing forms casting shifting patterns of light across the chamber. Though they remained silent, their presence was overwhelming, a constant reminder of the power they held over this world. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Rhaenys made his stance clear. "We will not surrender our identity," he declared firmly, meeting the gaze of the lead Ascendant. "But we will listen, share your knowledge, and will consider ways to coexist peacefully." For a moment, the Ascendant seemed to consider his words. Then, with a flicker of light from its translucent body, it signaled to the others. The group began retreating into the shadows, leaving the Zixari alone once more. As the tremors faded and silence returned, the team exhaled collectively. They had avoided immediate conflict, but the Ascendant's proposal lingered heavily in the air. Immortality and knowledge were tempting offers, but at what price? And how long could they resist the pull of such power before divisions within their own ranks began to form? Only time would tell whether the Zixari could navigate this fragile balance, or if the Ascendant's vision of unity would consume them all. The tension aboard the Luminara was palpable as the Zixari returned from the underground facility. The team gathered in the ship's observation deck, their glowing eyes reflecting the dim emergency lights overhead. Each member carried the weight of what they had learned, and the impossible choice now before them. The Ascendant's offer lingered in their minds like a shadow, tempting yet dangerous. For some, it represented salvation. For others, destruction. Kalis sat quietly at the edge of the room, her hands trembling slightly as she replayed fragments of her communication with the Ascendants. She couldn't shake the feeling that their proposal wasn't entirely malicious. "They've suffered so much," she murmured softly, almost to herself. "If we refuse them completely, are we any better than the humans who betrayed them?" Gerald turned sharply toward her, his voice rising in frustration. "Are you suggesting we let them absorb us?" "Kalis, they're not offering partnership. They're offering assimilation. Once you merge with them, there's no going back." "And staying separate means risking conflict," Talon interjected, her tone measured but firm. "If we reject them outright, they might see it as an act of war. We can't afford to alienate them further." Commander Rennis listened silently, his antennae twitching as he weighed the arguments. He knew the decision rested on his shoulders, but every option came with consequences. Allowing the Ascendants to integrate with the crew could fracture the team and potentially endanger their mission. Yet rejecting them outright might provoke violence, leaving both sides vulnerable. Before anyone could reach a consensus, alarms blared throughout the ship. Red warning lights flashed as the sensors detected movement outside. A swarm of Ascendants converging rapidly on the Luminara. Their translucent forms shimmered faintly in the darkness, their glowing circuits pulsating with intensity. "They're attacking," Lyra shouted, panic creeping into her voice as she scrambled to secure her datapad. "No," Rennis said sharply, his gaze fixed on the viewport. "This isn't random aggression. They're targeting something specific, the crystalline device." Talon's eyes widened as she realized what he meant. The device they had brought back from the ruins was still active, its faint blue light drawing the Ascendants closer. To them, it must have represented a key, a gateway to achieving their goal of unity. "We need to disable it," Gerald urged, already moving toward the containment chamber where the device was stored. "If we don't, they'll breach the hull trying to get it." But Kalis hesitated, stepping into his path. "Wait, that device contains everything we've learned about them, and maybe even a way to communicate further. Destroying it could cut off all chances of peace." "Peace," Gerald snapped, his voice sharp with disbelief. "You think they care about peace anymore? Look outside. This is an invasion." As the argument escalated, Rennis stepped between them, his presence commanding silence. "Enough. We don't have time for this." Turning to Kalis, he added firmly, "If disabling the device saves the crew, then that's what we'll do. But if you believe it holds value, you'd better find another solution. Fast." Desperation sparked in Kalis's eyes as she made her decision. Without a word, she grabbed a portable energy disruptor and rushed toward the containment chamber. The others followed closely behind, their footsteps echoing through the narrow corridors. When they arrived, they found the device glowing brighter than ever, its pulses sensing with the approaching Ascendants. "I can sever its connection," Kalis said quickly, positioning herself near the device. "But I'll need time, and someone to hold them off." "I'll stay with you," Talon volunteered immediately, her voice resolute despite the danger. Rennis nodded grimly. "The rest of us will guard the perimeter. Move quickly." As the Ascendants breached the outer hull, chaos erupted. Jarl and Lyra worked tirelessly to reinforce the ship's defenses, while Rennis coordinated countermeasures. Meanwhile, inside the containment chamber, Kalis focused intently on dismantling the device's core. Sparks flew as she manipulated its circuits, her movements precise but hurried. Suddenly, the lead Ascendant appeared at the entrance, its form radiating fury. With a surge of energy, it launched itself toward Kalis, but Talon intercepted, using a plasma shield to block its advance. The impact sent her sprawling, But she managed to buy enough time for Callus to complete her task. With a final burst of light, the device went dark, severing the Ascendant's connection. The invaders staggered, their unified hive mind fractured. One by one, they retreated into the shadows, leaving the Luminera battered but intact. Breathing heavily, Callus looked down at the deactivated device in her hands. Tears welled up in her eyes as she whispered, "I'm sorry, for all of us." Her sacrifice had saved the crew, but at what cost? The fragile bond they had built with the Ascendants was broken, replaced by mistrust and hostility. As the ship prepared to depart Velora, the Zixari couldn't help but wonder if reconciliation was still possible, or if the damage was beyond repair. The Luminera hovered above Velora, its sleek form battered but still intact. The crew worked tirelessly to repair the damage inflicted during the Ascendant's attack, their movements mechanical and weary. Yet beneath the surface of their efforts lay a deep unease, a shared understanding that they were leaving behind more than just a planet. They were abandoning a chance to bridge two worlds, however fragile that connection had been. Commander Rinus stood silently in the observation deck, his glowing eyes fixed on the swirling mists below. Velora's beauty was undeniable, yet it now carried an aura of sorrow and loss. He replayed Callus's final moments in his mind, the way she had sacrificed herself without hesitation, severing the crystalline device's connection to protect the crew. Her voice echoed faintly in his thoughts. "I'm sorry, for all of us." She hadn't just been apologizing for disabling the device or fracturing the bond with the Ascendants. She had been lamenting something deeper, the realization that coexistence between species often came at a cost neither side could fully comprehend. Rinus clenched his fists tightly, guilt gnawing at him. Had he made the right decision, or had fear clouded his judgment? Talon joined him in the observation deck, her own expression somber. "Do you think we'll ever see them again?" she asked softly, breaking the silence. Rinus sighed deeply. "It's hard to say. The Ascendants are resilient. They've survived betrayal, war, and isolation. But after what happened, I doubt they'll trust another species anytime soon." "They're not wrong to feel betrayed," Talon admitted, her voice tinged with regret. "We came here seeking knowledge, but when push came to shove, we chose survival over understanding. Maybe that's why humanity failed them in the first place." Her words hung heavy in the air, forcing Rinus to confront an uncomfortable truth. The Zixari prided themselves on being explorers, seekers of wisdom and empathy. Yet in this moment, they had acted out of self-preservation, just like the humans who had once abandoned the hybrids. Was history doomed to repeat itself? As the repairs neared completion, Jarrell approached the pair, his scanner in hand. "The hull's stable, and the engines are ready," he reported, though his tone lacked its usual confidence. "But before we leave, there's one last thing we should do." "What is it?" Rinus asked, turning to face him. Jarrell hesitated, then held up a small data chip. Callus recorded everything. The logs, the holograms, even her attempts to communicate with the Ascendants. "If we seal off the ruins and take this information back home, maybe future generations can learn from our mistakes." Rinus nodded slowly, a flicker of hope returning to his gaze. "Then let's make sure those ruins stay hidden. We owe them, and ourselves, that much." With careful precision, the team deployed drones to collapse key entrances to the underground facility, ensuring no one else would stumble upon Velora's secrets unprepared. As the last echoes of falling debris faded, the Luminera ascended into the stars, leaving the planet behind. In the quiet hum of the ship's engines, Callus's final message played over the comms, one she had recorded moments before severing the device. "Understanding requires empathy, even when faced with those who challenge our very existence. Remember us, not as victims or villains, but as beings searching for connection." Her words resonated deeply with the crew, reminding them of the weight of their journey. Though they had left Velora behind, its lessons would stay with them forever. Somewhere below, amidst the ruins and forests, the Ascendants watched the stars, waiting for the next visitors to arrive. Whether those visitors would bring peace or conflict remained unwritten. But the Scifi knew one thing for certain. They had glimpsed the blurred lines between creator and creation, evolution and extinction, trust and betrayal, and they had emerged changed, carrying the burden of knowledge and the hope of redemption into the vast unknown.